Hello, internet. It's been a minute. Apologies. Real life takes a lot of your time and keeps you from coaching on the internet. Okay, so what are we looking at today? We're looking at doubling back to the three most common errors that we see on disc golf form check page. First one, rounding. Most rounding that I see is caused by elbow orientation issues. You want your elbow on the plane you're going to throw. So your elbow will bend on the plane you're trying to throw on. So if I'm trying to throw dead flat, I want my elbow here. If I reach back like this, my elbow is not bending on the plane I'm going to throw on unless I'm trying to throw an upside down backhand roller, which I'm not. So look up the video here. Check that one out if you're not familiar with that. The more we can get that idea into the common knowledge base, the quicker we can correct beginners when they do it. And for some reason, I haven't seen anyone do a video specifically on that. Yes, Josh's box drill fixes it, but he doesn't explain what goes wrong. This is the box drill, right? It's here. This is not the box drill, right? But for some reason, beginners end up here because it's elbow tension. You don't want to hold the disc flat. Go watch that video. But today, we're going to look at footwork and bracing and how those conspire to mess up beginner throws. So first of all, the goal of footwork and bracing is to have a rear bound and a front bound on your rotation. This manifests in the footwork where the toe angles are. If the toe angles are open, you end up in sea basses and movable horse stance, and you can't compress your rotation. If you get your toes in and your front heel closer to the target than your toes, it's a lot easier to contain your momentum and compress your rotation. So what the heck does that mean? A lot of beginners end up toes too open in the back. Their weight falls down here, and then they have to crank forward. And now my rotation is happening over a long space window and a long time window. If you look at someone like Drew or Eagle or Simon or any top player, their rotation happens from their coiling from the X step to the plant, and the rotation happens, boom, all right here behind the brace. So beginners end up with rotation happening from here to here if they're throwing hard. If they're not throwing hard, if they're throwing too controlled, they end up shifting the weight on top of the brace, and their axis of rotation is here, where it's dead vertical and above the front foot. And what we want is not straight up and down, but a stagger and a hyzer tilt. And then the rotation is all going to happen from here to here. So the axis is always here. So that's compression. All of the rotation happens in a very short space window, in a very short time window. That's what makes consistency, right? If I'm setting up and I want to throw flat, already you can see a problem, right? This is fine. This is not an athletic motion. So when I'm here and I crank my spine over, so I set my angle up, I'm trying to throw flat. And then I shift and continue that motion. Crap, what happens? My swing plane moved because my spine angle moved. Whereas if I'm setting up my rotation to happen on a hyzer tilt behind my brace, I set up my plane here, I do all my rotation, and my plane is still right here. Everything's simple, contained, and consistent. That's the goal. And then the compression adds more power. Like same thing, rounding, there's no compression. It's a big motion over a big time window and a big space window. Whereas if I get to a deep pocket, I have that same amount of elbow hinge or even more elbow hinge compressed. So instead of happening from here to here, it's happening from here to there. So I'm compressing the rotation so that I get more spin, more speed, more RPMs on the disc. Everything's good. Okay, so that's what goes wrong. Too big of a next step, turning the toes backwards. And the only way to feel powerful from here is to engage a bunch of low back muscles and pull your spine over. Feels powerful, is not powerful. We don't want power to come from large muscle groups. We want power to come from timing, efficiency, and leverage. So leverage is right here, keeping this guy on the plane, not off the plane. And loading into a deep pocket, so you're compressing your extension into a smaller time frame. That's where we want power to come from. So what is better footwork? Timing is relevant. We don't want 1, 2, 3, because then I've drifted too much over the front foot and my axis of rotation is going to be above the top foot. We want Philo's apple pie timing, right? If you're putting, it's not 1, 2, 3. It's apple pie. You need time to load and then a more explosive unload. Same thing with the footwork in a backhand. You don't want 1, 2, 3. You want 1, 2, 3. So that would be 1, 2, 3. And then now we're into another concept, short leg, long leg. This keeps the angle from my shin bone to the ground more acute. This is more acute. This is less acute. This is obtuse, if I remember geometry. But you want an aggressive wedge into the ground. Because if you don't have that, if you get too far up here, then you can't contain your forward momentum. You lose containment in the front, and you lose a lot of consistency. So you want a short leg and a long leg, not a long leg and a short leg. This also happens if you take too big of a next step because you have too much speed and turn around backwards. Because now, as you rock onto the heel, the only way you can maintain balance and drive forward is to extend that knee, which pushes your weight up over your brace, which again, you lose containment. So you want to, this is your rear containment, keeping these toes relatively side on to your target line. It doesn't have to be a strict 90. It can come back to a 45, but I cue beginners to stay on a strict 90 because it prevents them from making all of these mistakes. So better footwork, toes perpendicular, 1, 2, short X step, 3. Keeping the weight here as long as you can, not shifting onto the front. Short leg in the back, long leg in the front, heel landing closer to the target. And now how to actually feel a brace if you don't know what a brace feels like. So this is not a brace. There's no containment. My hips are continuing to drift forward the whole time. So this is a cue that came from Tony Alvarez, another gentleman that coaches on Disc Golf Form Check and in real life. So go check him out. He's pretty solid. His cue for how to feel a brace is imagine you're wearing socks and you're trying to slide across hardwood, right? Short leg, long leg. So all of your pressure is going to go into your front foot. That's what's going to overcome the force of friction and start you sliding. Excuse me. Long leg, short leg. All your weight is going to stay on your short leg, right? If your weight gets on your front leg, then you've got long leg, short leg. And you're going to spill over the front. So try that as a drill. So no offset with this one. Just go straight horizontal. All you're going to do is set your foot down, take a step, set your foot down, and stop aggressively. So you're going to bounce your rear foot. I'm not picking my left foot up. I'm just stopping so aggressively that I tip forward for an instant before my weight is actually contained and I fall back onto this foot. So it's nothing crazy. You don't need to do this drill a ton of times, but if you're ending up here, bending your knee and falling over your brace, this will help you feel an option to get out of that habit, is actually stopping your weight. Another great thing is ice skater drills, right? Look up a tutorial on how to do those, but that's the same idea because I'm catching my weight and stopping before I drift all the way up. Also a great warm-up for backhand ice skaters. So that's option one, right? Where I'm shifting totally horizontally. So there's no rotation there. I'm just stopping my motion and then landing back. So if you want to add the rotation, a couple of things need to happen. You need to be aware of what your hips are going to do, and you need to add an offset so that there's somewhere for something to go. So two things are going to go somewhere. Those things are your hips. Your front hip is going to clear towards the rear, and your rear hip is going to continue to come around. So the best way to understand an active brace that I figured out And this idea came from Yerke. He's the one that clarified this concept to me in a private lesson that I did with him. He's an amazing coach. Go check him out. Give him all your money. He's awesome. So point your toes in, point your knees in, settle your weight down, and then all you're going to do from here is extend your front knee. So because of geometry, that moves your front hip backwards. This is clearing your front hip that Loop Ghost and Seabass talk about, but I had a really hard time finding a good description of that. Yerke cleared it up for me. So it's all you need is that, where you're just making this hip go backwards by driving into the heel and extending the knee. So when you do this statically with some explosiveness, watch my head. There's a little bit of boom, energy bleeds up that way because you're pushing with your leg. So in a dynamic throw, that is counteracted by the down force going into the brace. So a down force and an up force cancel, and your hips stay nice and glidey, moving sideways the whole time. But all of those are necessary to make the hips rotate how we want to. The hips don't rotate because we're rotating them. They rotate because of the ground force of the front leg. Whew. So to get that figured out, add a stagger or a window if you're Joel Freeman. And you're going to have all your weight on your short leg in the back. You're going to pour that weight into your heel. And now that you're shifting your weight on an offset this way, when that front hip comes into this mode and clears, it's going to move your hip off of your line of shift, and then your rear hip is going to continue forward on that line of shift. So the net result is hip rotation, but it happens because of this. So you have this stopping front hip, a little bit of knee extension moving the hip to the rear so that the front clears and the rear can follow through. So that's a push and a pull rotation in your hips. Then on top of that, you add that you have coiled your shoulders. So you've coiled your shoulders, put your shoulders behind your hips. Then when your hips start moving, your shoulders start catching up to the hips. They catch up at some point and actually probably go past your hips a little bit, not a whole lot. But timing wise, those two start at the same time. The reason they start is because your front hip stops, clears, and that is what creates the torque. Those are the first two layers. The third layer is pulling with your arm. You do pull with your arm, but if you start pulling with your arm before this has all happened, before the brace has initiated rotation, then you've disconnected the kinetic chain from your hips, which are your largest source of power, to your arm. Then your arm is ahead and disconnected from the hip power, and you're not ever going to throw with maximum efficiency. So you want layers. These two layers start at the same time, but there's lag between them because of the starting position. And then once the heel initiates hip rotation, which pulls the arm tight, then you can pull into a deep pocket position using mostly shoulder muscles. And then if you're a very good, talented athlete and you want to add some tricep extension, a la the Beto drill, you can do that. That is not necessary out to 400 feet. So don't worry about tricep push until you have the other pieces totally set. So ground up, not icing first and then cake, right? Get your cake and then put icing on it if you need to. You probably don't need to. Okay, so I think that's all we got. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thank you so much if you made it to the end of this 14-minute video. If you didn't, tell me why in the comments. But this is just me kind of drafting stuff, and I know this video is too long for YouTube, so thank you if you made it to the end. But I'll try to break these concepts up into smaller pieces. They're just so interconnected that it's really difficult to put out a video just on the short leg, long leg thing, or just on the sock drill, if you will. But if people want to see that, let me know in the comments, and I'll break it up into smaller bite-sized pieces as I am able. Thank you so much, Internet. Get out to the field and give it a shot.